Now, you created this motion path. So the interesting thing will be is I have two keyframes right now. If I decided that I didn't want it to be a straight line, I wanted something to happen in the middle, I could go to, again, a keyframe somewhere in the middle, like 15 would be in the middle, and I could change it. Maybe I want it to go down. Okay, so now I could, again, I made a change. Now, a lot of students might feel like when they're starting out, they might feel frustrated with this because they move it and then they hit play or they go somewhere else, and then it seems like their change is gone. And that is exactly what happened. Your change is gone. If you change it and you don't record that you changed it, if you don't make a keyframe here, it's not going to remember that you moved it up and down. It's just going to delete it on you. So I have to move it, and then I have to go to the little key symbol, and I have to click that. Okay, and now you can see what happens is I've added a third keyframe. It's in the middle though, so the first keyframe's at 0. This is a new keyframe at 15, and the original end one is still at 30, so this new one's in the middle, and because I have it dipping down, I have created a dip in the motion path, and it's a nice little curve here because by default Cinema 4D is set to do Bezier curves like Illustrator, like we saw with the pen tool. So if you don't want it to be curvy, you can change that in the F-curve manager. But for now, you can see what's happening there. Okay, so I'm going to hit play now. You can see it goes down. Okay, and then it goes back up. Okay, and at any point you can click on them, and you can see what number it's at. These, if you click on a keyframe that you made, this is what actually shows up in the Attributes Manager. Nothing right now that you'll probably find that you want to change, but at least you know that there are options there for it. Okay, so that's what it looks like now with 3 keyframes. Okay, now if you wanted to adjust this motion path, which is a little bit down the road, but I just want to point it out now because we're first talking about motion paths, so it's good to put it in your brain and then we'll revisit it. Okay, but if you wanted to adjust this path, then up here, if you go back to your menu and go to Window, then down here we have Timeline F-curve. Okay, this is a window, and you can see already it looks a little bit complicated. This is a window that lets you edit this motion path. So you have to go find what you're trying to edit. They're color coded, so if it's rotation, you can see it's red and it's at 0, so there's no rotation animation, there's no scale. But if I go here, I can see that this is Z, and then this green one is Y. Okay, so if I want to adjust, I'm sorry, I keep trying to grab this and I'm not getting it to fit. So I'm going to switch, let's see, go to the current frame. Okay, there's my, and I'm just scaling out so that I can see it. So there's my motion path for the Y, and this is my motion path for the Z. Okay, so both of those together create this shape of the path as it's going forward. So if I wanted to change it, I could come in here, and you can see that I have handles here, again, like you would see with the pen tool or something like that. And I could adjust this. Pull this over here. I could adjust this, and you can see that it will change. It will change my path pretty dramatically. Okay, so this one I'm making. You can see the shape here. I'm making this kind of like an S. Okay, and then over here you can see that it makes me a very different shape than what it did before. This is kind of almost like more like a bounce than what I previously had. So I'm going to hide this for a second, and I'm going to hit play. And you can see now it looks like my cube is bouncing. Okay, or very primitively, but it looks like it's bouncing. Okay, now if I undo that, now I'm back to a curve. Gonna hit play. And you go like that. Okay, so if you want to adjust the motion path, that would be this F-curve manager. but we'll revisit this. There's a lot of things up here that we want to talk about. We'll probably talk about this next lecture. Okay, but for this week, I just want to introduce it, have you see the timeline, know how to keyframe is the important thing, know what you can keyframe. Adjusting the motion path is something that will come with time, but I do want you to know that you can do it, and it's nice to be able to edit it in this manager and then see a visual update here in the actual path that the object has here. Okay, now this is stuff that's going to work for position, scale, and rotation. So if you do any of those changes and keyframe them, you'll see them here. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this window for now because that's as far as I want to go with the F-curve menu right now. I just wanted to show it to you so you know it exists and know it's possible to edit this path. Okay, so now we have our first animation. We've got 3 keyframes, so that's a lot of exciting things going on. So I'm going to pause this, okay, and I'm going to turn off my cube for a second, okay, and you can see if I exit out, then the motion path is still there. So I would prefer to hide this with the light switches, so that way I don't have to look at the motion path all the time. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a sphere so we can have something different to look at. Okay, and I'm going to do, for this one, I'm going to do multiple aspects of the how I would want to transform this object, and I would want to animate it. So I'm going to change the position, I'm going to change the scale, and I'll rotate it as well. Okay, now it is a sphere, so it might be hard to tell that it's rotating. Okay, but that's why I put line mode on, so that you can see where the lines are, and then when it's rotating, it should be you should be able to see how it's moving. Okay, so I'm going to record this. I'm going to say, like, imagine like that this is a ball, and it started off screen, and it's going to fall down into the plane here. Okay, so at 0, I'm going to take this and I'm going to pull it off screen. Okay, and I'm going to zoom out and pull it up a little bit. Okay, and I've moved it all the way up here, and I'm going to keyframe that. Okay, and then I'm going to go to, we'll do 30, we'll do 1 second and see if it doesn't look too slow. So I'm going to move this down to 0, 0, 0, basically. And if it's not quite 0, 0, 0, again, don't forget about 4 view. I'm going to come to 4 view, and I'm going to make sure that the very edge of the circle, the sphere, touches 0, 0, 0, because that's where I would maybe, like if I pulled the floor out, that's where it would go. So I'm going to put that in there. And before I move it, I got to make sure that I hit the key again. Okay? And I know I made a keyframe because I see the little gray rectangle floating near the number. Okay, if you do not have the little gray box here and you only have the blue one, you have not made a keyframe. So you always have to remember, as you're starting out this process, is that you have to make the change that you want. So in this case, I moved the sphere from the top of the screen to the bottom here. And once I've done that, once I've made the change, I have to go to the little key icon and I have to click it, okay? And doing that will record my position that I've changed, okay? And that's what this little gray box means, okay? It's different from 0, so I'll see animation. And again, you can tell that it did something because I can see that now I have a motion path here. I have a path showing me where the object is going. Okay, so I'm going to go back to 0. I'm going to hit play. Okay, so it's going from the top and it's coming down. It looks like it's on a conveyor belt. Okay, we'll talk more about going forward about how we would want to edit our motion so that we can make things accelerate or decelerate, or make something look like it's floating versus make something look like it crashed into something. All those are things that you will need to edit the timing and the speed that something is moving to give that illusion. Right now, you know, if we want this to look like a bounce, we would obviously have to do some tweaking. But for now, I just want to keep it simple. So it's a very basic sliding ball. It's sliding into the scene. It's not actually bouncing or something like that. Okay, so now I've got my position animated for my sphere. Okay, it starts off screen and then it comes down and it stops when it gets to 0, 0, 0 for the tip of the sphere. Okay, now say as it's coming in like that, I want it to start off big and then I want it to get really small when it gets down here. Okay, so that's the scale. So I would go to 0, okay, and I know that my size, I can see here, 200, 200, 200, is the size of the sphere that I have. Okay, so automatically when you do your keyframes, you are, because of these blue buttons here, even if I'm only changing position, which is what I did so far, I am also changing the scale. I mean, I'm not changing. I'm also recording the scale and the rotation, even though I haven't made any changes to that yet. So I recorded at 0 that the scale is, like 100%. And then at 30, there's no change that has been made, but I still made a keyframe for it. So I'm going to say, okay, at 0, I want it to be that big. But at 30, I want this to be small. So I'm going to scale it down. Okay, and you can see that it moved up as well. So when I scale it really small, and again, I'm going to scale it very small, then I'm going to switch to the move tool, and I'm going to make sure that I put that back at 0, 0, 0. So I made a change both to the scale and the position. Okay, so I definitely have to make sure that now that I made a change to 2 of those options, I have to come in here and click the keyframe button. Okay, even though I had a keyframe there before. If you have a keyframe already exists and you want to update it, you do not have to delete this one. You just have to hit the keyframe button again, and it will update the keyframe that was originally there. Okay, so now I'm going to hit play. Oops, and I've made a mistake. Okay, so I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to see what happened here. It looks like that for whatever reason, it doesn't look like my scale was recorded. So I'm going to make this bigger, and we're going to see what happens. We're going to see if this actually, if this reverts my frame 30, then I'm going to show you where we would fix that. Okay, so I'm going to record this here. Okay. Yeah, and for whatever reason, it seems like it is overriding. So it's not actually making a keyframe for my scale right now. Okay, it's just basically rewriting itself. And that's something that can be very annoying. So I'm going to go to 0, and I'm going to click on the sphere, and I'm going to go to the coordinates. And I can see here that in the coordinates panel, you can see that this is red, and this is red. Okay, and this is what you're actually doing when you press this keyframe button. Okay, I am recording what the position is for X, Y, and Z. I'm recording the scale for X, Y, and Z, and I'm recording the rotation. Okay, so you can see here that the scale is set to 1. Okay, and I've got a little red light here. Okay, and that means that I have recorded. I've started a keyframe here. Okay, normally what this looks like is, if you go to here, you can see normally these are grayed out, and I've mentioned this before in class. Anytime you see these little lights, that means that you could animate it. So what that means is I could click on it, and as soon as I click on it, that is the same thing as making a keyframe over here. But for parametric options, you'll click on this to keyframe it, not necessarily this. Okay, because this is supposed to do position, scale, and rotation. So for whatever reason, it's not a fan of me using the scale tool, I guess. So which seems odd. So I'll have to look into it and see why it's ignoring me. But this is something that we'll be using anyway. So I'm going to go down to 30, and I'm going to check here. And I can see that what happened is, at least why it's not working, is that if I look at the position for the Y, you can see that it's 1043. And then if I go to 30, you can see that now it's 14 with some change. If I look at the scale, you can see that it's 1, 1, 1 for X, Y, and Z. And then if I go to 30, it's also 1, 1, 1. So there is a keyframe there, as you can tell by these lights, that there are keyframes, but no change has been made that it recorded. So for whatever reason, it when what must be happening is when I change the scale, I'm manipulating the size here, and I guess that is technically not the same as if you were going to be keyframing the scale here. So it's fine. We'll just come over here and we'll just change this instead. So I want it to be, say I want it to be like 25% of this, okay? Then I could say 1 is like 100%, so I will put 0.25, okay? And now you can see it got flat, so I'm going to do the same thing, 0.25 for the Y. I want to keep proportionate, so 0.25 for the Z. Okay, and you can see when I make those manual changes, the keyframe now has gone from red to yellow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click each of those and make them red again. And now what I've done is I've recorded it. Okay, when they were yellow, that meant that I had made a change, but I hadn't. I basically haven't committed it to memory. So as soon as I click each one of those yellow circles and I make them red, now it's been recorded, it's been saved. So at 0, the scale is 1, 1, 1, okay? But at 30, the scale is 0.25, 0.25, and 0.25. So it should be 25% of the size it was. If you're thinking about this is 100%, this is going to be more like 25%, okay? And you can see that it's at 0, it's big, at 30, it's small, so that's a good sign. So now if I hit play, you can see that not only is it dropping, but it is also shrinking. Okay, so I think I'll make sure to double check, but I think what happened is when I use the scale tool, it's technically manipulating the size of the object, and that's not the same as scale. Okay, as in the scale for the object here. It seems odd to me that that's what happened, but at least you can see that you could also work with it here, which is a big way that you'll be working with keyframing anyway. So I'll double check that and see why, but I'm going to test it now with rotation, so we'll see if the same thing happens with the rotation tool versus if I were to go over here and write rotation in manually. Okay, so I'm going to go to 0, okay, and I can see that it's keyframe for rotation at 0. So maybe I want it to go like 180 degrees. It would spin upside down. Okay, so I would go to 30, and I'm going to get rotation tool, and I'm going to rotate this. Maybe I'm just going to see I'm going to do random numbers right now and see what happens. Okay, and I'm going to hit the keyframe button, and let's see if it rotates. Which it does. It's rotating. You can tell because the rotation tool is spinning. So I'll have to see what's going up with this. Okay. Maybe it's going to work for you. Maybe it's not. But I have a feeling you'll see that this is. You might run into issues with this. What scale is actually manipulating. Okay. So now you can see that what I have is my sphere is falling, it's scaling, and it's rotating. So all 3 of the major transform options that we have when we're starting out with an object, we are able to keyframe those very easily, very quickly. Okay, so I have 0, frame 0 is recording the position, the scale, and the rotation, and then on frame 30, I'm also recording the position, the scale, and the rotation, but what I now have is I have changes that were made. So these values are different from what's at 0. And that is the key here. You want to make sure that you have at least 2 keyframes, and those 2 keyframes are different. As long as something is different between the 2, then you'll see the animation will play over time to show you that change happening. That's essentially what animation is going to mean for you as you're starting out is that you're seeing a change happen over time. So it's getting bigger, it's getting smaller, it's moving faster, it's moving slower, it's moving in general. So there's tons and tons of things that you can animate inside of Cinema 4D, but those are the basic building blocks that you have, is that you have these keyframes. Those keyframes are going to record the changes that you want to happen, okay? And then Cinema 4D is going to look at those keyframes that you are showing it, what changes you want to make, and it's going to figure out what's going to happen in between those, okay? And that's actually a term that you'll see in animation. Keyframes are the main poses or the main changes that are going to be happening in animation, and then in-betweens are the frames that exist in between those two keyframes. So that would be, in this case, it would be 1 to 29 are the in-between keyframes, and Cinema 4D is actually figuring those out for you. So you tell it 0, you tell it 30, they're two different keyframes, and then Cinema 4D looks at 0, it looks at 30, and then it figures out how to get there. And all of the frames in between, each one of those change a little bit. So in this case, each one of these keyframes moves a little bit, it scales a little bit, and it rotates a little bit to get you from 0 to 30.